Welcome to the Breaking Down Walls podcast with Natalie Grospitch and Jill Barrile.
Jill and I were talking before we hit record, and I was telling her that I really would love to share a story about shame today. And I love talking about shame because all of us have it. Every last one of us has it, unless there's some sort of, I don't know, bizarre tweak in the brain. I would argue that every human being that I have ever met suffers from shame. And I love talking about it because first of all, I think a lot of people don't want to talk about shame. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because it is like really painful a lot of the time. And also, I think people don't talk about it because it's pretty intimidating. It
Yeah.
can seem really big. It can feel like it's part of every piece of our lives, our memories, ourselves. And also, I think that sometimes we just want to ignore it and pretend that it doesn't exist. So it's very complex. But throughout my years of coaching, I've come up with some pretty cool reframes around shame and also some pretty cool ways to release shame, which I wanted to talk about today. But Jill, what has been your experience with this sticky, gooey emotion?
Yeah, no, I love shame too, actually. Because I think shame is the one of the most important things almost that we can experience because a lot of times that like leads us to our purpose, I think a lot of times. I think there's a lot of juice in shame because it's the biggest, scariest thing you could ever like lean into is shame to me. And so I know like my biggest shames have become my biggest breakthroughs and my biggest like shifts has been tackling and leaning into shame. So, oh, it's so disgusting. But it's also it makes me like my stomach hurts right now thinking about it. But because I'm kind of like trying to overcome some of my own currently, but having gone through some and moved through some at this point in my life, it's like, whoa, God, I freaking did that. Like it's pretty wild. Yeah, shame is huge.
It's
Like
super
I have so
huge.
much
So,
I actually so much I want to ask you about it. So like let's
yeah,
yeah.
oh my God. I want to
Mm.
dive into all of it, but I think before we do, it's important to define what shame is.
Yeah.
And because it comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. But I would personally, if I could summarize it in just a few words, shame is the part of ourselves that says, I'm not enough.
Mm.
And it can say it in so many different ways, in so many different circumstances. But I think that at its core, shame is this deep, deep, deep rooted feeling of just not being enough as you are. How would you define it?
I love that. Actually, that's a great way to put it. And if you get to the root of it, it's yeah, I think it is saying a lot of that. I think it pushes, I think you know when something's shameful is if it feels edgy. So to me, like I think a lot of shame is rooted in, hmm, let me feel that actually. There's like an uncomfortableness, right, to it. Like I guess like it is the I'm not enough piece that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think you said it great, like in that way that it's like it is a little bit I think there's like fear that kind of shows up as well. It feels a little undefinable to me sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's kind of this like, is that shame? Like how how I can't like always like grasp it. I feel like I'm doing with my
Like a
finger.
gooey, moldy thing that infiltrates. I, when I first started my healing journey a long time ago, I read the book You Can Heal Your Life by Louise L. Hay. Highly
Love that.
recommend. Have you read it before?
Yeah, I have it. I haven't read the whole thing. I like dabble in there. Like I don't go through
Yeah.
I think I went through the maybe I did. I don't know. But yeah, I know it. It's good. It's really good.
It's like a lifelong study and it took me a few tries to get through it and then I ended up working through it like three separate times. um, during like my early mid-20s. And one of the things that I love about her, there's a million things I love about her, but she does talk about how she got to this point with every one of her clients where when she finally peeled back enough layers of their trauma, their limiting beliefs, their stories about themselves, their stinking thinking, whatever, the bottom of all of it was the belief I'm not enough. And then she would do her magic in a very, from what I understand, she used a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think that she used energetics. Maybe it wasn't explicitly stated because this was, the 80s and 90s, but I think that that was where a lot of her healing occurred. And so she offers a lot of that kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy approach within this book, which is great. It's a really, really great place to start. And one of the analogies that I'm pretty sure was hers was that our inner world is like a house, and
Yeah.
it was originally built for us by our parents. And so we're essentially gifted this house built by our parents, and our minds and our experiences are kind of formed around it. And this house has, many different rooms that carry and hold many different parts of ourselves and many memories and things like that. I also love the concept of us having different parts. If you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, I think that's a phenomenal representation of parts work, also known as internal family systems, which we should probably do an entire episode on because I freaking love parts work. But you can envision that all these different parts of yourself are living in different rooms of this inner house.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening once we hit like our teenage years or early adulthood, I think a lot of us start to become aware that we're carrying beliefs and we're carrying these elements of ourselves that maybe aren't even really us. They've just kind of been bestowed upon us, either generationally or early in our lives or whatever. And that's when we go through this process of basically reclaiming our home. And that inner world becomes a bit of a demolition process, specifically for those who go through like an awakening.
Yeah.
That's when we start taking sledgehammers to the walls and we start breaking down walls, man. Here we are again.
I was waiting for it. Yes.
But in that process of
Mm,
breaking down walls and renovating, and sometimes I even think of the show Hoarders on TLC where, these poor people have like stored so much
yeah.
stuff in their physical space, but we do that too mentally, and
Yeah.
really sifting through just all the stuff from our lives that we've accumulated and kind of asking ourselves, do I want this? Do I need this? Do I want to carry this into the next chapter? And I love that analogy of like renovating our inner world and asking ourselves these big questions of like, what is anger to me and what makes me angry? What is sadness? What is fear? What is guilt, even? And what I found is through this renovation process, which took several years, there was like always this kind of like nagging feeling that there was more cleaning, more scrubbing that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I metaphorically got down into the basement of my mind and found this like black mold of shame that
Mm,
I've realized had been like kind of infiltrating the air in the
mm,
entire house, and it had gotten into the pipes and the water system. And I had to basically metaphorically, through a lot of healing and a lot of like being really honest with myself, get on my hands and knees and scrub. And that process of like looking at the shame and asking myself, what the heck do I do about this? And then doing those things, finding amazing healers and therapists and shaman to work with to help me move that up and out. That was when I finally felt like I did it. Like I got to the core of healing. Like this is the thing, this black mold that was infiltrating the basement of my mind was what was motivating me to be on a healing journey all along. And once I got that up and out, it was like I was reborn. It's not even like I was reborn. Like truly I was reborn. And that was when I felt like I stepped into the current version of myself. And so it does take a long time to get through those other layers before we're finally ready to approach the shame in the basement. But I kind of really want to dedicate this episode to those who are listening, who are at that point in their journey, who have maybe like just touched down on that level and been like, oh my gosh, this has been motivating me to heal and buy all those self-help books all along. Um, or maybe those who have been trying to scrub it up and out for a while and are kind of stuck with it. Like I want to give some new perspectives, and I'm very excited about
I'm really excited. I wanna like I love the analogy of the house. There's another one that comes up for me, like when I'm thinking about the programs that we are given, like as children, and like what we're grown up feeling, and the beliefs and values that are like put on us. And I think of like my sometimes as my whole system as a computer. And like if I had not updated my beliefs and my values, like I'd be operating from like a 1995 computer, like my software is like not functioning.
it.
And like
Right.
that's how I've thought about it for myself, of like how can I keep operating from a place that was like instilled into me when I was 5 years old. And like I need to update that. I need to like, I need to put some like firmware in there, like some boundaries. And like just like keeping my system like clean and up to date. Like that's how I always thought of it, but I love the house too, getting to the roots of roots of it all, I think is brilliant. I know I went through something similar, like just within the last 4 or 5 years, of like I felt like I was so deeply out of alignment, and coming back felt like taking the garbage out of my house like a hoarder. Like I felt like my house was good, like the bones were good, but like I had cluttered it with so much bullshit. That like from my like 20s and like early teens and stuff like that. And it really took taking out the garbage and then scrubbing. Like I was like, I feel like I cleaned, but or I got rid of this stuff, but now it's like I gotta get the grime. I gotta like take a Q-tip to the wall or something. Which like, yeah, I think that's like when your shame really starts to become more apparent, because you're in better communication with your body, and your relationship with yourself changes so much. And then other things can start to come up and be processed because there is that space now for it. So,
Yes. And I think that we bury our shame on purpose because it is the hardest part of ourselves to look at. And if it arises too soon in the healing process, I think it can be really, really overwhelming for people. So I think that it kind of like it's a protection mechanism to shove it so far down, and to bury it under a lot of other emotions first, because the process of sifting through all of those layers or updating all of those different, all those different softwares, gives us the strength and the stamina to finally like really meet ourselves at the core. There's so many opportunities throughout life for that feeling of like not being enough to get poked. And this is where like I want to talk about, we talked about what shame feels like and kind of what it looks like and how it can show up. But I want to talk about the purpose of shame. Like, why the heck do we carry that awful feeling with us? What is it good for? What does it do? And I know that you were saying before, Jill, that like it has been a catalyst for you. It has for me as well. But I want to break that down a little bit because I have some theories about what shame shows us and what it
okay.
does. But I want to hear what you have to say first, if there's anything you want to add.
Well, I wanted to add, like, that was actually one of the big questions I had for you, is like, do you think there is good shame? Do you
Good
think,
shame.
yeah. d-
Interesting.
And that's something I wanted. That was like the only thing that I was like, I've never really talked to anyone about good shame, but we always try to like dismantle shame and de-shamify and get rid of shame, but I'm like, is there any shame that is actually good for us? And so that was the only thing I wanted to play with because but I want to hear all the things that you have for it. And because like the only thing yeah, so many things. There's so many things I want to like. This is probably 100 episodes. We should probably
Perfect. Perfect.
yeah,
I'm fine with that
yeah.
because I think that and maybe this will change as I gain more experience, but from where I'm at right now, I don't think that shame is designed for us to carry long term. I think that shame has some very potent short-term benefits for us when we choose to approach it, look at it, learn from it, and then release it.
Yeah.
So this has been like the kicker for me and my entire coaching practice. Um, and I don't know, maybe I'll blow your mind in a second, maybe not, but I was just recently working with a client who I know very well and who I adore. And she was dealing with this shame that was coming up. There was an issue with her landlady, and unfortunately, her landlady was really, really poking a spot inside of her that is occupied by her father's authoritarian rule in her life. So she comes from like a very, very, yeah, a very authoritarian father she grew up with. And so he shamed her a lot during her upbringing. She's internalized a lot of those beliefs. She's done a lot of work on herself. She's done some incredible healing. And now, in order for her to see those other little spots that still could use some healing, she has this landlady who has been unfortunately poking at these spots. And so she was carrying a lot of this misery and suffering. She kept calling it suffering when we talked for several weeks, maybe even a couple months. And she came to me because she was like, I can't keep like I need to get rid of this. I'm done with this. This is ridiculous. And so we started off the session with just a little bit of a conversation, and I didn't know all of the details of this until we sat down to talk. But when she started talking about the shame that she had received or she had inherited from her father, and she started talking about how it felt on her shoulders, like this sticky, like viscous sort of boogery energy. And I recognized it as, this shame that we have. I said to her, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that this might be an indication that you have surrendered your authority to something outside of yourself. And she
Mm,
immediately burst into tears. And she was like, yes, that's it. That's it. She's like, I don't want my father's voice to be my authority anymore. I want to be my own authority. And she was like, how do I do that? Because I know she's there. I've heard her. I know that I have this very strong, beautiful inner voice. I know I have this higher self, but I don't know how to make her my authority. And I'm so done with my father calling the shots in my mind because she doesn't have contact with her father in the physical realms. He lives inside of her head because
yeah.
she has surrendered her authority to him when she was a very, very little girl.
Mm,
And what I think the purpose of shame is for us to have that moment of reclamation of our sovereignty, for us
mm,
to recognize, oh my God, I have been trying to get approval, justification, fill in the blank from something outside of me, from someone outside of me. And I am done with that now. And I'm going to take back my own inner authority. I'm going to become my own sovereign state. And
mm,
I'm going to let my higher self be my authority or source or whatever your higher power is, whatever you want to call it, whatever, if you have a religious affiliation, that's fine. I think this is something that does get talked about in Christianity to an extent. Christianity's a little tricky though, depends on who's influencing the core message, but in the end, there's there is this commonality among a lot of religions and a lot of beliefs. I don't want to go super, super deep into that right now, but I want to go back to just that decision to allow your soul, or whatever you want to call it, that core of you that is perpetually connected to the universe and to love itself, to become the ruling force in your life. I believe that shame teaches us to take back our power in the deepest, deepest sense of the word.
Damn. Mic drop. I think you cracked it right open. Jesus Christ.
Breaking down
About the
walls,
man.
breaking down walls.
Worked on something for me right there. Holy shit.
Um,
I'm curious about like for her, and maybe you said this and I missed it, but like was her father's passed at this point, you said?
no, no, they
Okay.
just don't have contact at this moment.
Oh, they just don't have contact. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, she decided, like, I think it's been like 8 months or so, that she just really wanted to step back from that relationship. And she realized that in doing so, she was healing very, very quickly. So she's kind of just decided that she's gonna maintain a distance until she feels ready, or if she feels ready to re-enter that. But she's taking space to breathe right now, and I think it's really good for her because she's gaining some perspective, that's super helpful.
Well, I think that's a really point, like that brings up a lot of like, both in parenthood and in like being a daughter or son too, of like there are times that we do have to step away from the parent that has raised us because we don't realize the shame they have instilled in us, and they may not reckon. I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this too, of like and then we come back to it and we can really see from a really different perspective of like, huh, that wasn't me. That was something that was placed with me at a time, and like it no longer is um serves me, or it's no longer like in alignment like with my truth, you could say.
Yes.
Um I think about it as like a parent now of like is that especially to a toddler where you're like you don't want to shame them, but you also want them to follow some sort of regimen at some point or another. And I think about like my language so much as a parent of I don't want to ever shame you, but I also want there to be like I don't want your behavior to be crazy and erratic. So like you're not so you can function in a society with other humans. And so it's a really delicate balance, I find, like knowing how destructive shame can be, but at sometimes like when is it was it like it served us for like you said, like there's certain little times where it's like I needed that, but now I felt it, I use it or I don't use it. So I'm do you have any thoughts on that? Like as far as like for parents?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really, really important is to understand brain development and to understand that, like, children before the age of 7, generally speaking, will think that anything going on around them has to do with them. Because for those first, specifically 7 years of our lives, we're extremely egocentric because that's all we know. Like, those little adorable undeveloped people don't have the capacity until a little bit later to think outside of themselves. And
Yeah.
so when something goes wrong, or when mom's in a bad mood, or when dad is upset about whatever, like, that little brain is going to process it the best way that it can. And oftentimes, it's not going to catch the reality of the situation because it can't. So a lot of these feelings or beliefs of like, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, whatever, it's instilled in those moments of confusion and in moments of the kids just not being developed enough to really understand the full scope of
Yeah.
what's happening. So I don't think that it's possible to 100% avoid your child feeling shame because even if you as a parent did, they're still going to have other adult figures in their lives. They're going to have other older kids in their lives. Like kids are going to, everybody is going to feel that at one point or another because it's just kind of part of how we are as a species. From
Yeah.
my understanding of like the human brain, like we can only do what we can do with the brain development that we have. But
Mm.
what I think we can do, and again, I'm not a parent, so like take this take this with a grain of salt.
But
But what
curious.
I think would be effective is to just always have those open conversations as much as possible. And specifically, as the child does start to get older, really getting on their level and explaining like why emotions are happening the way that they are, or gifting your child with the gift of emotional intelligence by helping them understand what their emotions are in the present moment. I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of really good resources for gentle parenting out there, which I know you already like work on, and I think that's something that's already um in your awareness. But gentle parenting is not permissive parenting. Gentle parenting is really working with, from my understanding, it's working with the brain development that the child has in the present moment and
Right.
creating appropriate boundaries in regards to that child's brain development. And I think that when we give ourselves that space and also give ourselves grace, because there are going to be periods of time where you don't mean anything by what you do or say, but your child is going to take it as something that you didn't mean. But as long as there can be conversations about emotions and processing together, I think that a lot of that shame can be either released as you go, it can be used as a learning experience, it can deepen your relationship with one another because of the vulnerability that it will create. And I think that like especially with you, babe, like you are a very intuitive and empathetic person, and I think that you're going to find ways to work with it as it comes up.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's good. That's good. I just think about that a lot, like not even just for me as a parent, but like, I mean, I don't, I don't have as much, there's a little shame from my parents, I would say. And has it shaped me? Yeah, I guess it has in such a way. And like, we're maybe at this point in life, knowing what I know about myself, it's like I can be grateful for the shame that has been put on me by not like just that, but other authorities, that teachers specifically. I felt like I received a lot of shame more in the school academic space sometimes. Um, that it's like, wow, you made it harder for me, but also like this is where I feel like I'm going to do really well, like in my life. And that's sort of like my something I think about is like, well, I don't want to not give you like the chance to overcome something. Not that I wanted to come for me, but like there is like, the tool of I can help you overcome this, but like there are always is going to like something's going to come up. You're going to develop shame. Like you can't, like you said, you can't just be shameless forever. I mean, like you can, maybe there's people that are pretty shameless, I guess, but like whether is it shameless or recklessness could be like kind of piled up in there at the same time. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think in some ways, especially when we're developing, the shame can really make us conscious of other people. And
mhm,
I feel the same with guilt. Like guilt and shame are social emotions. If we lived on a planet all by ourselves, we would never feel guilt and shame because it's relational. So
yeah,
it's like you have to mess up with another person in order to feel either of those emotions. And then it's really up to you to decide, okay, what am I going to do with that now that I know that it's there? So that's kind
yeah.
of where I wanted to talk about the fun stuff, which is releasing shame and getting
Right.
into that good stuff.
Well, remind me too, and maybe this is like from the book you were referencing, the I Can Heal Your Life, I Can Heal My Life. I think it's from her book, but it could be from somebody else. It was that like shame is saying like I am not enough. somewhere in that realm, and guilt is like I it wasn't like it wasn't talking about me. It's like that wasn't enough. Like it's like guilt is like a little bit more outside of you, and shame is like more of like I am, and guilt was a little more like that wasn't, or like kind of like that external.
Yeah,
Don't
interesting.
remember if it was that book or like something else that I read that kind of gave me a little bit more insight of like guilt is sort of something that's like you feel guilty, but then it kind of goes away, where shame is like kind of more like part of who you are.
Hmm.
It's harder to
Yeah,
move through.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that phrase, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I tend to look at guilt as a need to repair. So
Mm,
either you have to repair something with another person, or it's asking you to repair something with your relationship within yourself.
yeah.
So guilt asks for a relationship repair, shame asks for a reclamation of inner authority.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm. And the cool thing is that both of these things can be played with within the energy of the body. That mind-body connection, in my experience, is, if not the most profound, definitely one of the most profound tools that we have for releasing guilt and shame from our psyche, from our our space. I and that is a lot of the work that I do. So I do work on multiple levels. When I was working with this client recently, once we were able to identify, okay, there's shame in the body, it's showing up in this way, it's coming from this point, then we start to work with energy itself. So she was personifying the energy as something that was like sticky and on her shoulders. And we would go through all the different colors and things like that. And I want to leave the details out of like the next few parts just for the privacy of my client. But essentially, we ended up moving that energy out of her body. And she like beat up a pillow, she yelled, she my, we did this in a space where I had this like stick thing lying around, and she started like hitting the couch with the stick. Like it was just, she was able to take the energy and actually physically move it from her body and have that somatic release. And one of the things that I think happens when we're going to stick specifically with shame, because of that power dynamic that happens in those moments where shame is instilled within us, we either freeze or we run away or we withdraw. And I think that in those moments, the energy, the anger, the maybe we feel like this is unjust, this isn't fair, this isn't true, this isn't right, whatever. It's like we've repressed it and we've really like buried it deep inside of us. And so that energy that ends up manifesting as shame is like festering beneath. So when we
Mm,
can actually get the energy up and out of our body and we can give it the opportunity to somatically express itself through typically hitting something or yelling or a mixture of the both or crying or whatever, it gives that to me is how you release shame.
yeah.
Is you find it, you identify it, you come to terms with what it is trying to teach you, and then you get it up and out of your body. And then from there, you decide, what do you want planted in its place?
Mm,
So once we got that shame of I'm not enough that had been gifted to her from her father, we got her super freaking connected to her higher self consciousness. And we let that higher self consciousness energy infiltrate every single cell of her body and basically like evaporate was the word that she liked. We evaporated the rest of that lingering energy that was no longer serving her. And we created this beautiful, safe space. And in that, one of her one of her pieces, one of her parts that she had rejected from the trauma actually came back to her. And I've had this experience myself, but a teenage part of herself that she didn't even know was missing ended up coming back to her. We brought her back into the whole. And this morning, I got an 18-minute voice memo from her about how many things have shifted and changed and completely rearranged themselves in her life by
Yeah.
having that experience of releasing what was no longer serving her and reclaiming what was rightfully hers.
Mm.
And
I
that was so cool.
That is so what a powerful story though, because and I love that piece of like not just releasing but replacing. I think that's really
Always.
important because I think that we release, but then like anything could take its place.
Yeah.
So
And I
like
think that I
intentional, you know?
I think that that's one of like the biggest qualms that I have with like the self-help industry at this point is that there are so many women that I know before they come to work with me who have been stacking up self-help books for the last 10 years and just pouring all this money into therapy. And they're like, why am I still on this hamster wheel? I know what all my trauma is. I've cried all the tears. I've done all the things. Like, hello? Like, why am I still spinning? And it's like, babe, you ripped out all the weeds, but what did you plant? You gotta get that new stuff in, that like desire that you were talking about before of like knowing what you want and knowing who you really are and what you want to be, that inner authority. There has to be that point in time where she takes over, where her wisdom and knowledge and knowing and light and love takes roots in your space, and that's when you get off the hamster wheel and it feels amazing to get there.
Yeah. Oh my God. I have chills. Honestly, I'm just like I needed to hear this today actually in a lot of ways. So thank you. I'm sure whoever's
Welcome.
listening to this also probably needs to hear this today because it just reminds me that we have like there is so much that we have control over and that you get to decide that things don't have to always be the same and it doesn't
Mm.
have to, you know, like suck in so many people's phrasing of like, why does life suck? Well, it doesn't have to. You know, like we can like really dismantle that and we can really take ownership of what we can control and that's like all of our interpersonal relations and everything that's inside of us. Like we do have a lot of control over that if we like allow ourselves to, which is like the work that I love. On top of that is like building that relationship with the self afterwards of like how do we keep ourselves in it, keep ourselves in the pleasure, keep ourselves in that desire, like once we even put it there. So it's just like so much good stuff. I love it.
Yes, me too. And there's one more thing that I
Yeah.
wanted to add to that because I think what makes this journey so difficult, this part particularly with the shame, is that I personally have had very, very limited success healing my own shame by myself.
Yeah.
That has been something that consistently I have needed help with. And
Mm,
also, that's why I'm so passionate of helping others. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that, like, shame is rooted in vulnerability. And so when
mm,
we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in a healing space, it can also be extremely healing. I think
yeah.
sometimes that shame teaches us it's not safe to be vulnerable. But then
Yeah.
when we are vulnerable in a healing space with another person and we have a massive breakthrough and we feel like $1 million afterwards, it's like we override that belief and we go, oh no, actually, it is safe to be vulnerable. It's more than safe to be vulnerable. It's beautiful to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say with my own story, with the language and how all of that was like rising up, I really didn't know what to do with it myself. I think a lot of us are like this in the healing space where we're like, I can look at another person, I can hear their story for 20 minutes, and I can know exactly what to do, and we can just have the session and it's done and it never comes back. But if I need to do the same for myself, it's just not gonna happen. And I think there's a reason for that because there's beauty in healing collectively. You get a lot out of it. I would argue more than just healing alone. And so I'm very, very lucky that my husband also knows how to do these things. He uses different techniques because he's an osteopath. And so for him, he uses these like really freaking cool trauma techniques, trauma release techniques from a physical space. And so he and I had a conversation. I was talking about like the whole language thing, and I realized that when I feel confused, I feel unsafe. Those
Mm,
particular emotions were just really, really tied up for me.
yeah.
And I realized that like I save myself from the I'm not enough belief by constantly understanding things and making sure that I comprehend. But when I can't comprehend, that thing rises right to the surface. And when I said that to him, I could just feel it all over my body. And I was like, that's the thing. That's the point in my energetic sphere that wants to be released because it's not serving me any longer and it's time to go. And I am extremely lucky that he knows how to do his own techniques. And he like it you roll
He
around
do
on
to
the
you.
what's that?
So what did he do?
So I don't know exactly how this works, but
Okay.
essentially we like rolled around on the floor and he would like as soon as we like set the intention to get started, my body just did its own thing.
Mm,
And like my limbs would move, I'd roll from like left to right, whatever. And he taps in with his osteo techniques and he basically just supports the trauma release movement of my own body. So it's
wow.
like I'm leading it, but he's helping me go like deep into all of the movements and unlock the whole thing. And it was
Okay.
probably, if I were to guess, it probably took like 10 minutes, but my brain completely shut off and my body just knew what to do. It was
Yeah.
so cool. There was something about and he's gone to school for this and he's done like a lot of studies about how this works and everything. So like I have no idea. I just know that I experienced it and it was really freaking cool, but he has the expertise and the understanding of how to guide the movements to their completion. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about trauma release, like specifically with Peter Levine's theories, which could be updated for sure, but essentially the core of his theories is that trauma is energy that was trapped in the body. And so what you want to do is you want to bring that energy to completion. And so with the techniques that Sam does, he is somehow, some way moving that trapped energy in my body to completion based
Yeah.
on just my random, I mean, seemingly random muscle movements. And it was so flippin' powerful. I barely thought a thing. I just felt and it moved through. And we did that over the weekend. And I picked up my German studies again on Tuesday. And I haven't cried once. And
Yay.
I've ran into some pretty awful corners with Der die Das. And I vented my frustration without getting worked up and without it ruining the rest of my day. And that to me is a massive accomplishment. And I think it's also a testament to the fact that our bodies hold so much freaking wisdom. And
Mm,
if we allow ourselves to surrender to being held by other people who understand how all this stuff works, we can do so much healing so quickly and we can
yeah.
get to a point where it's just done and it doesn't have to come back.
Yeah.
I love that part of this. It's like once you get those weeds out by the roots and you plant something new in its place, it's like that stuff stays. It stays until you decide otherwise. And it's so cool.
I love that. You know, two things are coming up as you're talking about this is that, okay, where I don't want them to leave me. Don't leave me. Okay, I have one. Um, the act of being witnessed, I think is such a powerful thing. Like you were saying, the vulnerability. Something one of my coaches that I work with, her big thing is like shame slaying. She's like, if I feel shame, I like eat it for breakfast. I basically just like go after it. Like she's practiced so much that she just is like, I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to say it to people and I'm going to share it. And for her, that's like served her. Like that's kind of how she started was like through shame slaying is what she calls it. Of I'm going to talk about the biggest thing that I feel the most shame about and I'm going to just release that. And it's helped her so much in like her success. And I feel that too. Like I even had a question this morning, something I've been moving through. And as soon as I like spoke it to a group of people to witness me, and I've done this with Justin too, of like, I just think I needed you to witness me. Gonna get a witness. Like literally, like it goes away almost where I'm like, huh, I just needed someone to like see me in my vulnerability. I just needed someone to see this come through and how powerful that is. I'm excited because like what happened before I came here, came into our podcast today was like I have a woman that's coming in here to do women's circles at our studio and what we got to talk about is like just like really the mirror and the witnessing that happens in those spaces and like how like you're like I'm gonna talk to a bunch of random people about what's like on my heart like what like that feels kind of like why but we've been doing that actually for so long but we've gotten away from it but like generations past like that was how we like told stories and how we moved through stuff and like that was a really big part of being in community and to see that like kind of being brought back and like what people do experience and how they can like even feel connected to somebody just by sharing things that feel really vulnerable is very it's very powerful and I love that stuff. And I also wanted to say on the whole shaking like movement thing, we did a lot of that in my base studies of somatica. Actually, I don't remember exactly why they sent us the like what we were talking about, but they sent us a video and it's of a zebra that has just been like attacked by. Have you seen this? The zebra
Mm.
that's been attacked by a
Not a
lion.
zebra, but I've seen it with the gazelle. They all do it.
Yeah, and so like they do this shaking, right? And after seeing that, I'm like, it makes so much sense that we're always told to push things down, push things down. And it's like our body wants to push them out so we don't have to experience that trauma anymore, right? Like as it's a trauma response and like our body goes into this scared or fear and I think it's the same with shame like so to like let the body do what it needs to do. I know personally this past couple weeks I've been like doing what you were saying like hitting couches and I'm like I feel like this rage and I want to just feel my rage. I'm not shaming my rage. I'm going to put the music on. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to like go through the motions that my body actually wants to go through. Whether I complete it or not, I don't know. Like who knows? Um and it just brings us even back to childhood. Children throw their bodies like a friggin' like they don't give a shit. Like they're just like whatever. And to not, I think that even comes back to the shame of parenthood of like let them move through the motions that feel really good to them in safety, right? Like as long as they're not banging their head against concrete wall or something, that would not be ideal. Um, but supporting them in like moving that through the body, they like are so much more in touch than
Yes.
we are because we've been conditioned to sit still and be quiet, so many of
Hmm.
us. And the thing is, it's like let them move through it, let it happen for them. Um, and I know like Isaac goes through it, and there'll be times it's like an hour long where you're like you're still moving through this, like holy crap. And then sometimes I get frustrated and like I feel like I probably don't always let it come to completion, but there is also maybe a point where it's like, okay, I need to help you finish this too, so maybe there is like that thought process as well. But I just think that's so knowledgeable to bring into this space because like some people I've been talking to are like been moving through all this like talk therapy, and not saying that talk therapy is not a bad thing, like, because that is a vulnerable place.
It's a
But
really good place to start.
yes, and I think it needs to be paired with other things that you're doing.
Yes.
If you're just doing that, if you're just doing therapy, I don't think it's gonna work, to be honest. Like, that's my opinion. Anytime I've done therapy and something else along with it, it's been the best, like more like fluid shifts. I think they say that even with when you go to a chiropractor, you should also go to a massage therapist, because like one like warms you up and one like to make your muscles more like butter or whatever. So I feel like it in the same sense of therapy warms you up to talk, and then like maybe a coach, an osteo, like whoever you want to work with, like is going to like double down on that essentially in some ways.
Yes, 100%. I'm really excited to see what becomes the standard in the therapeutic space over the next like decade or two, because more and more people are realizing that. Like I was saying earlier, like cognitive behavioral therapy was the norm for a while, and we're realizing like, okay, yeah, it's good to get you started, but it's also excruciatingly slow if it's the only thing that you do. And so the more that people are realizing that the answer after you've identified, the problem in a cognitive way, if that's what you feel like you need. I know for me, I have to know what's going on cognitively before I'm ready to go further. There's probably some people who don't need that and who can just drop directly into their body, and that's fine. But like, we are mammals at the end of the day, and a lot of our stuff, if not all of it, is stored in our tissues, and we got to get that up and out in one way or another. And everybody has like different, favorite modalities for that. But I totally agree with you. Like doing it in tandem. My favorite clients to work with are the ones who have been in therapy and got to a point where they were like, all right, I'm just kind of repeating myself at this point, so I guess we're done here. And then they
Yeah.
come to me, but they have so much self-knowledge and so much self-understanding. That's when I can like basically be cleanup crew for 3 or 4 sessions, and they're good to go. And I love it. I love working with people who have done that sort of inner exploration already.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Down Walls podcast. We'll see you in the next one real soon.